Hello, everyone, and welcome to this how-to video for ACES on calculating your school's carbon footprint. So many of you will be concerned about energy and its costs. And we've talked in previous videos, which are available on the ACES website, about how you can calculate all of those characteristics of how your school uses energy. We haven't yet talked about how to then calculate a carbon footprint. So this is some quick information about how you can do that. The benefit of a carbon footprint is if you are concerned about carbon, calculating it for your school provides a starting point. It's measured generally annually. And as you get years and years of carbon data, you can compare it to see how you're progressing on reducing your carbon footprint. The activity of calculating a carbon footprint is quite educational and can connect to both your energy efficiency efforts in the school, as well as what educational activities around climate change the school might be undertaking. And other learning can ensue about carbon footprints that are related to actions for carbon reduction, can inform both the school's decisions and priorities, as well as applying to those who want to apply carbon reductions in their homes. So just a bit of context for a carbon footprint. We're talking here about what is considered the national standard. There are several different ways of calculating a carbon footprint, but these are the most common. So carbon, in this case for a footprint, is short for carbon dioxide. It's the main greenhouse gas that is the cause of climate change. And generally, this greenhouse gas comes from the combustion of fossil fuels. Carbon footprint is usually expressed as tons of CO2 or CO2e. For the rest of this presentation, we're talking about CO2e. The E stands for carbon dioxide equivalent, and it represents all the greenhouse gases from the combustion of fossil fuels expressed as if they were carbon dioxide. And for those interested, the two numbers that come out in tons, they were almost the same, slightly different, but it's the standard we'll be using. So there are three scopes of the source of carbon emissions that a school needs to be aware of. Scope 1 are emissions directly from a site. So if any organization, school or otherwise, is calculating a carbon footprint, it's generally from any gas, oil, or other fossil fuels combusted on site. So from heating in most cases. Scope 2 emissions are indirect, and they come from the use of electricity, which is most often generated from a combination of renewables and power plants around the UK, and is used by the school. So the school, in effect, is responsible for those carbon emissions, even though they've come from miles down the road, as it were. Scope 3 emissions refer to emissions not directly from a school, for example's site, but from its supply chain. So this could be, for example, from the travel of employees to the site, could be from the supplies that you get into the kitchen, or other things used on a site that come from other companies. For the purposes of this presentation, we're only looking at scope 1 and 2, but we will have some resources about scope 3. So how do you calculate a carbon footprint? If you have the total fossil fuels, so that in most cases will be gas or fuel oil for the school, and your electricity as expressed in kilowatt hours. And if you don't, please look on the ACES resources. We've done a video about this there that you can access. Take those kilowatt hours, and you also need to find the carbon equivalent coefficients for the United Kingdom for this year from the UK's government website. With those, you can then make a calculation. You multiply your kilowatt hours for each individual source, so for gas and electricity separately, and you multiply that by the coefficient and divide the number by 1,000. So here's an example of that. Some more information about having done the calculation, where the coefficients are coming from and what they are. So coefficients are published every year. The 2022 UK carbon coefficients are in kilograms per kilowatt hour, which is why we divide by 1,000 to express as tons. On the screen are the three most common coefficients. So we have the one for gas, electricity, and fossil fuel. If you need these for 2022 or any previous years, since they've been published, I think from as far back as 2015, they're on the BEIS website under greenhouse gas conversion factors, and it's an Excel spreadsheet you can access. Right, now, if you're interested in Scope 3 resources, first let me caveat that with it is quite difficult to calculate, and it's very often with bigger organizations, they hire a team to do this because often supply chain is a very complex iteration. But if you are interested in that school, here's a couple of interesting facts. So it is often based on estimates, as is almost always the case in this world, and it can be complex. Sources for a school might include transport to the school, for example, transport from field trips, school meals, etc. It's probably worth having a good sense of what you're interested in if you want to explore this for educational purposes. There are a couple of resources that may help, including the WWF has an environmental footprint tool. There are lots out there, but this one is particularly useful for individuals to use. So you might give that to students to fill out, where you enter some information about your lifestyle choices, and it gives you a footprint with some interesting information. The second link there is it's a report about carbon calculations, and on page 6 there are a list of other related calculators that can help with Scope 3. Otherwise, if you have any specific questions, while we're not experts on this, ACES will be happy to point you in the right direction if this is of interest to your school. So good luck with calculating carbon footprints. Please visit the ACES website to see our other resources and also to ask us any questions. Thank you for listening.